Picture this. It's after 2 in the morning. You standing on a frozen trail in the middle of nowhere. It's dark, your hands are freezing, and then you hear someone call your name from the trees, not some weird voice, not a scream, your brother's voice. And for half a second, you almost answer. Then you look to your side, your brother is standing right there. Yeah, that's when you stop worrying about getting lost. Stories about the Wendigo are full of moments like this. Footprints around a cabin when no one is outside. A voice in the woods that knows your name. Something moving between the trees, but every time you look straight at it, nothing. And tonight, I've got 3 stories. The first starts with a man finding tracks outside his cabin. The second gets weird when 2 friends hear a voice that should be hundreds of miles away. And the last one, that one starts with a missing person, but by the end, you may realize the person they were looking for wasn't the biggest problem in that forest. So keep one thing in mind. That voice from the beginning. We're coming back to it. The first story starts with footprints, and at first, that really doesn't sound scary. It was January when Ethan rented a small cabin in northern Minnesota. He wanted 3 quiet days away from work. His phone, traffic, basically everything that had been driving him crazy for the last few months. The cabin was exactly what he wanted. Small, old, cheap, and far enough from the nearest town that his phone only got a signal if he stood near one specific window in the kitchen. Which is great when you want some peace. Not so great when something goes wrong. Ethan arrived late in the afternoon. He brought enough food for 3 days. A couple bottles of water, extra clothes, and way too much coffee. There was a wood stove inside. An old generator behind the cabin, and his car was parked maybe 20 feet from the front door, nothing fancy. But it worked. That first night was completely normal. Ethan made dinner, watched something on his laptop, and went to bed around 11 then. Sometime during the night he woke up, he wasn't sure why. The room was dark, the fire had almost gone out, and for a few seconds he just lay there listening. Nothing, no footsteps, no voices, no scratching at the door, just wind moving through the trees, so he rolled over and went back to sleep. The next morning, he made coffee and stepped outside. That's when he saw the footprints. They started near the trees behind the cabin. Ethan figured they were from a deer. There were plenty of deer around there, so mystery solved. Except when he got closer, they didn't really look like deer tracks. They were too long, and the space between each print was strange, almost like whatever made them had been walking on 2 legs now. Ethan wasn't the kind of guy who sees one weird footprint and decides Bigfoot has come to eat breakfast with him. He assumed the snow had melted around the tracks during the night and changed their shape. Honestly, that made sense, so he went back inside about an hour later. He came out again to get some firewood, and this time he noticed where the tracks ended, right below his bedroom window. Ethan stopped. There were maybe 6 or 7 prints in the snow. They came out of the trees, crossed the open ground, and stopped at the wall of the cabin. That was it. There were no tracks going back. He walked around the cabin, thinking maybe he had missed them. Nothing. He checked the other side, nothing there either. Whatever had walked up to his window hadn't walked away. Okay, that was weird, but still. There were normal answers. Maybe snow had covered the other tracks, maybe they were old. Maybe Ethan just wasn't very good at reading animal tracks. All 3 were better answers then. Something came out of the woods and disappeared outside my bedroom, so he let it go. Or at least he tried to. That afternoon, Ethan went for a short walk, nothing crazy. He followed a trail behind the cabin for maybe half a mile. The weather was getting worse, and the sky had that flat gray color that usually means more snow is coming. About 20 minutes into the walk, Ethan heard something behind him, a branch snapping. He turned around. Empty trail. He waited, nothing moved. Then another branch snapped, farther back this time. He laughed to himself. Probably a deer, and honestly, if you spend enough time alone in a forest, everything starts sounding like it's following you. Ethan kept walking. A few minutes later, he heard it again. Snap. He stopped, the sound stopped, he walked, another snap, stopped, silence, walked, snap. That was when it stopped being funny. Ethan turned around and stared down the trail for a few seconds. He saw nothing. Then something moved between two trees way back in the forest. He only saw it for a second, a dark shape, tall, too tall. He thought then it was gone. Ethan didn't wait around to get a better look. He turned back toward the cabin, and this is where things started getting really strange, because on the way back, he found another set of footprints. The same long prints he had seen that morning. They ran beside the trail, not on it. Beside it, between the trees. Ethan walked faster. The prints stayed with him. Every time the trail turned, they turned too. Then Ethan stopped because the prints stopped. He looked ahead, nothing. He looked behind him, still nothing. Then he noticed the last footprint. It was maybe 10 feet to his right, and there was no next one. Ethan stared at the trees. He later said this was the moment he really wanted to run. But you know that weird thing people do when they re-scared. Sometimes you don't run. You just stand there and try really hard to prove to yourself that you being stupid. So Ethan waited. 10 seconds. 20. Then he heard something breathe. Not behind him, above him. Ethan looked up. There was nothing in the branches. That was enough. He ran. He didn't stop until he reached the cabin. He locked the door, closed the curtains, and immediately grabbed his phone. No signal, of course, because apparently horror stories have rules. He tried the kitchen window. One bar appeared, then disappeared. Ethan decided he was leaving. 3 quiet days in the woods had officially become 1 quiet day and a very fast trip home. He threw his clothes into his bag, grabbed his keys, and went outside. His car wouldn't start. He tried again. Nothing. 3rd time. The engine turned over, struggled for a second, and died. Ethan just sat there. Come on, he tried again. Nothing. By then, snow was falling harder. The road out was already getting difficult to see, so Ethan did the only thing he could think of. He went back inside, locked the door, and waited. By 5 in the afternoon, it was almost completely dark. Around 6. Ethan heard the first sound outside. Crunch. He looked toward the window. Crunch. Something was walking through the snow. Slowly it moved past the front of the cabin, then stopped. Ethan stayed away from the windows. A minute passed, then 2, nothing. He started thinking maybe it really was a deer. Then something knocked against the wall. Once, Ethan froze. A few seconds later, another knock, this time from the other side of the cabin. That didn't make sense. Nothing could move around the cabin that fast without Ethan hearing it in the snow. Then came another knock, from behind him, right beside the bedroom window. The same window where the footprints had ended that morning. Ethan didn't move, and then, nothing. 5 minutes passed, then 10, 20. The forest went completely quiet. Eventually, Ethan started to relax. Just a little. He stayed awake with every light in the cabin turned on. Around midnight, he realized he hadn't heard anything for hours. No footsteps. No knocks. Nothing. Maybe it was gone. Then Ethan heard a slow scraping sound above him, on the roof. He looked up. The sound moved from one side of the cabin to the other. Slowly. Scratch. Pause. Scratch. Pause. Ethan grabbed the fireplace poker and stood in the middle of the room. Not exactly the weapon you want in that situation. But hey, you work with what you've got. The scratching stopped directly above him. Then came one heavy step. The whole ceiling creaked. Ethan didn't sleep after that. He sat against the wall until the first light came through the curtains, and the moment he could see outside, he left. He didn't even bother with the car. He took his backpack, walked down the road, and eventually reached a larger road where a driver picked him up. Later that day, Ethan came back with 2 other people to get his car. By then, the snow had stopped. The tracks around the cabin was still there. They found the ones near the bedroom window. They found more behind the cabin, and they found the line of prints coming out of the forest. But Ethan said there was one set he hadn't seen before. They were on the roof. The prints started near the edge, crossed the snow above his bedroom, and stopped directly over the room where Ethan had been sitting. There were no prints leading up the side of the cabin, none leading back down, just a line across the roof, and one final print, right above the spot where Ethan had spent the night. Now, maybe there's a normal explanation for all of this. Maybe the tracks were from an animal. Maybe the sounds were branches hitting the cabin. Maybe Ethan saw a tree moving in the dark and his brain filled in the rest. You can explain almost every part of this story that way, almost. Because there's still one question. If something walked across that roof, how did it get up there? The second story is about a voice. And honestly, I think this one is worse. Because you can run from footprints. But what do you do when something in the woods sounds exactly like someone you love? This happened to two friends, Ryan and Noah, during a winter camping trip in northern Wisconsin. They had done trips like this before. Nothing extreme. They weren't climbing mountains or trying to prove how tough they were, they just liked getting away for a weekend. Hiking during the day, setting up camp before dark, and complaining about how bad instant coffee tastes, normal camping stuff. Their plan was simple: hike about 6 miles into the forest, camp for one night, then head back the next morning. The weather was cold, but clear. Their phones had no signal once they got deep into the trail. But they knew that would happen. They had a paper map, a compass, flashlights, extra batteries, enough food for once. Two people in a scary story actually came prepared by around 4 in the afternoon. They found a good place to camp. They set up their tent near a group of pine trees, started a small fire and made dinner. Nothing strange happened. Not at first. Around 6, it was completely dark. Ryan was sitting near the fire when he heard someone call his name. Ryan, he looked up. Noah was sitting across from him. Ryan thought maybe Noah had said it. What? Noah looked confused. I didn't say anything. Ryan waited. There it was again. Ryan, this time it came from the trees far away. Maybe 50 or 60 yards. Ryan stood up. Noah heard it too. Someone was definitely out there. And the first thing they thought wasn't monster, it was another hiker. Maybe someone was lost. Ryan called out, "Hello." Nothing answered. Noah grabbed his flashlight and pointed it toward the trees. The beam moved across snow, branches, tree trunks. Nothing. Then the voice came again, Ryan. And this time Ryan knew the voice. It was his sister, Emily. He actually laughed, not because it was funny. More like that little laugh your brain does when something makes absolutely no sense. Emily lived in Chicago. She wasn't on this trip. She didn't even like camping. Ryan once tried to get her to sleep in a tent in their backyard, and she lasted about 20 minutes. There was no chance she was standing in a frozen forest in Wisconsin. Noah looked at Ryan. "Who is that?" Ryan didn't answer right away. Then the voice said something else. Rye. Ryan stopped smiling. That was what Emily called him when they were kids. Nobody else used that name, not Noah, not his friends. Nobody. Noah asked again, "Do you know her?" Ryan nodded. "My sister." Noah stared at him. "Your sister is here." No, that answer changed everything. They went quiet. The fire cracked between them for maybe a minute. Nothing happened. Then Emily's voice came from the forest again. "Ryan, come here." Noah immediately said no, and Ryan agreed. Whatever was happening, walking into the dark forest to find out seemed like a terrible plan, so they stayed beside the fire. A few minutes passed, then 10, no more voice. Eventually they started talking again. They tried to explain it. Maybe another camper had a similar voice. Maybe sound was traveling strangely through the trees. Maybe someone was messing with them. None of those answers were great. But they were answers, and answers feel pretty good when the other option is, well, something in the woods knows your childhood nickname. Around 7. Ryan went to get more wood. He didn't go far. Maybe 30 feet from the fire. He was picking up a branch when he heard Emily again. Ryan, closer this time, much closer. He turned toward the voice. "Nothing, Ryan, over here." It came from behind a tree, maybe 20 yards away. Ryan took one step toward it, then Noah shouted from the camp, "Don T." Ryan stopped. That was when he noticed something. The first time he heard the voice. It had been far away, then Ryan answered it. Now it was closer. He went back to the fire. Neither of them said anything for a while. Then Noah pulled out his phone. No signal, but the camera still worked. So he opened the voice recorder and put the phone on a log beside them. If it happens again, we record it. That actually made Ryan feel a little better. Now they could prove they weren't imagining it. For almost half an hour, nothing. Then a voice came from the darkness, but it wasn't Emily. Noah's face changed immediately. Ryan looked at him, the voice came again, Noah. Ryan whispered, "Who is that?" Noah didn't he answer, the voice said, "Come on, buddy." Noah stood up. Ryan grabbed his arm, "Who is it?" Noah looked toward the trees, "My dad." There was one problem. Noah's father had been dead for almost 3 years, neither of them moved, the fire suddenly felt very small. Noah's dad called his name again. Same voice, same way of speaking, even the little pause before the word, "Buddy." Noah later said that was the part that scared him most. It wasn't he just copying a voice, it was copying the way his father talked, the timing, the little habits. Things you don't notice until you hear them again. Ryan picked up Noah's phone. The recorder was still running. Good. At least they had that. Then Noah's father said, "You left it by the river." Noah went completely still. Ryan asked what that meant. Noah didn't he answer. Not at first. Then he told him when Noah was 12, his father gave him an old pocket knife. Years later, during a fishing trip, Noah dropped it somewhere near a river. He never found it. He had never told Ryan that story. The voice came again, "You left it by the river." Now they weren't trying to explain anything. They started packing tent. Forget it. Sleeping bags, leave them at that point. The forest could keep the $20 cooking pot too. They put on their backpacks, grabbed the map and flashlights, and started walking back toward the trailhead. The plan was simple. Stay on the trail, keep moving. Do not answer any voices. For the first 15 minutes, nothing followed them. Then Ryan heard Emily. Ryan, far behind them, he kept walking. Ryan, wait. He didn't turn around. Noah told him not to. They walked faster. Then Emily said, "Mom's in the hospital." Ryan stopped. Noah almost walked into him. What? The voice came again. "Mom's in the hospital." Ryan knew it couldn't be real. He knew that, but that's the problem with hearing someone you love say something like that. For 1 second your brain forgets all the smart decisions you made 5 minutes ago. Ryan turned around. "Emily?" Noah swore. Because the moment Ryan answered, the voice moved. It had been far behind them. Now it came from somewhere much closer, maybe 30 yards. "Ryan." They started walking again, fast, then faster. The trail was easy to follow at first. Their flashlights showed footprints in the snow from earlier that day, their own. Everything was fine until Noah stopped. Ryan almost bumped into him. "What?" Noah pointed ahead. There was an orange light between the trees. Ryan felt relief for maybe 2 seconds. He thought it was a light from the parking area, then he realized the light was flickering. It wasn't a street light, it was fire. They walked toward it and found their campsite. Same tent, same logs, same half-dead fire. Ryan stared at it. They had been walking away from this place for almost 40 minutes. They had followed the trail. They hadn't turned around, but somehow they were back. Noah pulled out the map. Ryan checked the compass. They argued for a minute about where they had gone wrong. Then Noah noticed something. Their tent was open. They had left it closed. The front flap was hanging loose. Ryan pointed his flashlight inside. Their sleeping bags were still there, so was the food. Nothing looked missing. Then Noah's phone rang. Both of them jumped. There was no signal. The screen didn't show a call. It was the voice recorder. The recording had stopped. Noah picked up the phone. The file was still there. 47 minutes long. He pressed play. At first, they heard the fire, their own voices. Then Emily calling Ryan, clear as day. Ryan looked at Noah, so they hadn't imagined it. The recording continued. Then Noah's father called his name. Same voice they remembered. "Come on, buddy." Noah stopped the recording. He didn't want to hear any more. But Ryan noticed something. At the bottom of the screen, the audio showed a long section after they had left the campsite. Almost 40 minutes. Noah pressed play again. Footsteps, breathing, their voices getting farther away as they walked into the forest. Then silence. The phone had been recording from Noah's pocket. For about a minute there was nothing except the sound of them walking. Then another sound appeared. A third set of footsteps, slow, crunch, crunch, crunch. Ryan looked at Noah. They kept listening. The footsteps stayed behind them for the entire recording. Sometimes close, sometimes far away, but always there. And then, near the end of the file, something spoke. Not Emily, not Noah's father. Ryan's own voice. Coming from behind them, it said, "Wrong way." Ryan stopped the recording. Neither of them spoke. Then, from somewhere beyond the fire, they heard Ryan's voice again. "Wrong way." This time they didn't pack anything. They ran, they picked a direction using the compass and went straight through the trees. No trail, no stopping, no answering. Branches hit their jackets. Ryan fell twice. Noah lost one glove. They didn't care every few minutes. A voice called from somewhere behind them, sometimes Emily, sometimes Noah's father, sometimes Ryan. Once it sounded like Noah. That was the worst one, because Noah was running right beside him after about an hour. They reached a narrow road. They followed it until they found a house with lights on. The owner let them inside and called for help. They were cold, tired, and several miles from where they thought they were, but they were okay. The next morning, they went back with 2 other people to collect their gear. The campsite was exactly where they had left it. Nothing was damaged. Nothing was missing. There were footprints everywhere from Ryan and Noah walking around the camp. But outside that little circle, nothing. No tracks following them. No tracks near the trees, nothing that showed another person had ever been there. And maybe that should have made them feel better. It didn't, because Noah still had the recording. Ryan listened to it again a few days later. He wanted to know if there was something they had missed. There was, right before Ryan's voice says, "Wrong way." There are about 3 seconds of very quiet audio. Ryan turned the volume all the way up. At first, he heard only their footsteps, then another voice, very quiet, almost a whisper. It said, "Good," he answered. "And that's the part I can get past. Because if something was copying their voices, why did it need Ryan to answer first?" The third story starts with a missing man. His name was Michael. And by the time his friend Daniel went looking for him, Michael had already been gone for 3 days. Michael wasn't some guy who wandered into the woods wearing sneakers and carrying half a bottle of water. He knew what he was doing. He had been hiking and camping for years. He knew the area. He carried a GPS. He had food, extra clothes, a radio, everything you'd want if something went wrong, and still he disappeared. Michael had planned a 2-night trip through a remote part of northern Minnesota, nothing unusual. He had done similar trips before. He parked his truck near the trailhead on Friday morning and told Daniel he'd be back Sunday afternoon. Sunday came. No Michael. Daniel texted him. Nothing. He called. Straight to voicemail. At first, he wasn't too worried. Maybe Michael had stayed an extra night. Maybe his phone died, maybe the weather slowed him down. Then Monday morning came. Still nothing. That was when Daniel called for help. A search team went out later that day. They found Michael's truck exactly where he had left it, locked, nothing broken, no sign that anyone had touched it. His phone wasn't inside, neither was his backpack. So Michael had definitely gone into the forest. The search continued until dark. They found footprints near the trail, some old, some new, but with snow falling on and off all day, it was hard to tell which ones belonged to Michael. By Tuesday morning, the search area got bigger. That's when they found his first campsite, and this is where things started getting weird. The tent was still standing, his sleeping bag was inside. There was an empty cup beside the fire pit, a cooking pot was sitting in the snow. It looked like Michael had been there and then just decided to walk away. His backpack was gone, so was his GPS. That gave everyone some hope. If he had taken those, maybe he had gotten lost and was still moving. Then one of the searchers found footprints behind the tent. They started near the campsite and went into the trees. At first, they looked normal, boot prints, probably Michael's, but about 50 yards into the forest, another set appeared beside them. Longer, narrower. The searchers couldn't tell what made them. They assumed it was an animal, and honestly, that was the best answer they had. The strange tracks followed Michael's for maybe 100 yards, then Michael's boot prints stopped. Not faded, not covered by snow. Stopped, the other tracks continued. Daniel heard about this later that afternoon, and that was the moment he decided he was going out there himself. The search team didn't love that idea. Neither did Daniel's family, and to be fair, they had a point. Adding one more missing person would not exactly help. But Daniel knew Michael. He knew where Michael liked to camp. He knew the routes he used. And more importantly, he knew Michael had a habit. Whenever Michael left the main trail, he marked trees with small strips of orange tape, not because he got lost easily, because he hated getting lost easily. So the next morning, Daniel joined a small search group. For the first few hours, they found nothing. Then Daniel saw orange tied around a branch. Michael's tape. A few hundred yards later, another one, then another. They followed them deeper into the forest. The trail led away from the normal hiking route. The snow got deeper. The trees grew closer together, and after maybe an hour, Daniel noticed something odd. The tape markers were getting lower. The first had been around eye level. The next was around his chest. Then his waist. Daniel thought maybe snow had pulled the branches down. That made sense until he found the next marker. It was tied around a branch maybe 2 feet above the ground. The one after that was almost touching the snow. Then the markers stopped. The search group spread out. About 20 minutes later, Daniel found Michael's backpack. It was sitting against a tree. Clothes dry inside. Food was still there, extra clothes too. His radio was inside, so was his flashlight, but the GPS was missing. Daniel called the others over. They searched around the backpack. No Michael, no clear tracks. Nothing. Then Daniel noticed something scratched into the snow beside the tree, a line. Then another. Almost like someone had been dragging a stick back and forth. He didn't think much of it. Not then. The group searched until late afternoon. Nothing. Eventually, they had to head back. The temperature was dropping fast, and another storm was coming. Daniel hated leaving, but staying after dark wasn't going to help Michael, so they returned to the trailhead. That night, Daniel barely slept. The next morning, he went back. This time the search moved farther north. Around noon, someone found the GPS. It was lying in the snow less than half a mile from the backpack. The screen was cracked, but it still worked, and luckily it had saved Michael's route. At first, the track looked normal. Michael had followed the main trail, reached his campsite, stayed there overnight. The next morning, he left. Then his path changed. Michael walked north for about a mile, turned east, then south, then west. He made a circle, a huge one. Then he did it again, and again. For almost 6 hours, Michael had been walking around the same area. The circles weren't perfect, but they were close. That was strange enough. Then Daniel zoomed in. Every circle was smaller than the one before it. Michael wasn't just walking in circles, he was slowly moving towards something in the middle. Daniel checked the map. There was nothing marked there. No cabin, no road, no lake, nothing, just forest. The search team decided to check it. They reached the area about an hour later. There was nothing there, just trees, snow, a few fallen branches. Daniel walked around, staring at the GPS. According to the map, he was standing almost exactly in the center of Michael's circles. Then he heard someone say his name, Daniel. He looked up. One of the searchers was maybe 50 yards away. Daniel thought it was him. What? The man looked over. I didn't say anything. Daniel felt something cold move through his stomach, and no, not because it was winter. The voice came again, Daniel, farther into the trees. He knew that voice. Michael. Daniel took a step forward, then stopped. Michael called again, Daniel, over here. The other searcher heard it too. They both stood there listening. Michael, Daniel shouted. Nothing. Then maybe 10 seconds later. Yeah. Daniel started moving toward the voice. The other searcher grabbed his jacket. Wait. But Daniel was already thinking the obvious thing. Michael was alive. He was close. They had found him, so Daniel called again, Michael. The answer came almost immediately. Over here. Closer now. Daniel pushed through the trees. The other searcher followed. They went maybe 100 yards. Then Daniel saw something orange tied around a branch. Michael's tape. Another marker was farther ahead. Then another. Daniel forgot how strange those markers had been the day before. At that moment, they meant one thing: Michael had been here. They followed them. The voice kept calling. Always a little farther ahead, never far enough to lose, never close enough to see. After 10 minutes, the other searcher stopped. Daniel turned. The man was looking behind them. What? Where are the markers? Daniel looked back. There were none. The orange tape they had followed was only visible ahead. Nothing behind them. Daniel walked back to the last tree. No tape. He checked another nothing. That was impossible. They had just followed them. The other searcher pulled out his radio, static. Daniel checked his phone. No signal. Then Michael shouted, "Daniel!" This time he sounded scared. Daniel turned toward the voice. "Michael, help me." Daniel ran. The other man followed. They pushed through a wall of branches and came into a small open area. Empty. Daniel stopped. Michael, nothing. Then he saw footprints, boot prints. They crossed the clearing and disappeared between the trees on the other side. Daniel recognized the pattern on the bottom. Same boots Michael always wore. They followed them. Then another set of tracks appeared beside Michael's, long, narrow, just like the ones found near the first campsite. Daniel stared at them. The two sets continued together, side by side, for maybe 30 yards. Then Michael's tracks stopped. The other tracks kept going. Daniel didn't move. He had heard this part before. The first campsite, Michael's tracks ending, the strange ones continuing, same thing. Then something moved between the trees ahead. Daniel lifted his flashlight even though it was still daylight. The forest was dark under the trees. For a second, he saw a shape, tall, thin, standing completely still. Daniel couldn't make out a face. He couldn't even tell if it was looking at him. Then Michael's voice came from that direction. "Daniel." Daniel took one step back. The shape didn't move. "Daniel, please." It sounded exactly like Michael, tired, cold, scared. Daniel wanted to believe it. Every part of him wanted to run forward. Then he remembered something. Michael never called him Daniel, not once. They had known each other since high school. Michael called him Danny, always. Even when Daniel asked him to stop. Especially when Daniel asked him to stop. Daniel stared at the shape. "Say my name again." The other searcher looked at him like he had lost his mind. The forest stayed quiet. Then, "Daniel, that was enough." They backed away. The shape remained between the trees. Daniel kept his eyes on it. One step, then another, then another. The trees blocked it from view. They turned around and started walking fast. Then Michael screamed behind them, "Danny." Daniel stopped. There it was, the right name, the one Michael actually used. The other searcher told him to keep moving. Daniel didn't Danny. Wait, now it sounded perfect. Exactly like Michael. Daniel turned around. Nothing was there. Then the voice came from his left. "Danny." Then his right, "Danny." Then behind him, "Danny." They ran. For the next 20 minutes, they followed the compass south. No trail, no markers, just south. The voices followed. Sometimes Michael, sometimes Daniel. Once, Daniel heard the other searcher calling for help somewhere behind him, which would have been pretty convincing. If the man hadn't been running 3 feet to his left, neither of them answered. Eventually, the voices stopped, and somehow that was worse because now they had no idea where whatever was making them had gone. They kept moving. Then Daniel saw orange ahead. Tape, one small strip tied around a tree. He almost walked toward it. Then he stopped. The tape was tied around a branch maybe 8 feet above the ground. Daniel looked at the other searcher. Neither of them said anything. They walked around it. A few minutes later, they found another, higher, maybe 10 feet. Then another, 12. That was when Daniel finally understood what bothered him about the markers from the day before. They hadn't been getting lower. Something had been putting them at different heights. Something that could reach branches Michael couldn't. Daniel looked up into the trees and saw a strip of orange tape hanging nearly 15 feet above them. They ran again, this time. They didn't stop until they heard voices from the actual search team, real voices, people calling their names from the trail. Daniel almost answered, almost. Instead, he waited until he could see them. Only then did he speak. They made it back before dark. The search continued for 2 more days. Michael was never found. Eventually, the weather got too bad. The search was called off. For Daniel, that should have been the end of it. It wasn't. A week later, someone gave him Michael's GPS. Daniel took it home. He wanted to understand those circles. Why had Michael walked around the same place for 6 hours? Why did every circle get smaller? Daniel loaded the GPS data onto his computer, and that's when he noticed something the search team had missed. Michael's route wasn't one continuous line, there were short gaps. Sometimes 10 seconds. Sometimes 30, one gap lasted almost 2 minutes. GPS can lose signal under thick trees. Nothing strange about that, but Daniel noticed that every time the signal returned. Michael had moved closer to the center, not walked closer, moved, sometimes hundreds of feet, with no path recorded between the 2 points. Daniel checked the times. The last jump was the biggest. At 2:12 in the morning, Michael was near the edge of the circle. At 2:13, he was almost in the center. Daniel stared at the time. 2:13, that number bothered him because there was one more thing on the GPS. Michael had used it to mark a location. Just one. A point in the center of the circles. Daniel opened it. Michael had given the point a name, 2 words. Danny here. Daniel stared at the screen. Michael had marked that location 3 days before Daniel ever entered the forest. 3 days before Daniel heard his voice. And 3 days before Daniel stood in that exact spot. Now, maybe Michael was confused. Maybe he typed the wrong thing. Maybe the GPS data was broken. Maybe there's a normal answer buried somewhere in all of this. But Daniel remembered something else. Something he hadn't thought about since that day. When Michael's voice first called him from the trees, it called him Daniel. It only started calling him Danny after Daniel corrected it. Which means whatever was out there. Didn't he know everything? Not at first. It was learning. The same way it learned Emily's voice. The same way it learned Noah's father. Maybe even the same way it learned where Ethan slept. And suddenly, those 3 stories look a little different because maybe the footprints weren't from something hunting people. Maybe the voices weren't just trying to scare them. Maybe every time someone looked out the window, answered a voice, or followed a sound into the trees, they were teaching it something. And if that's true, there's one part of Daniel's story that bothers me more than anything else. Michael's GPS didn't say, Danny coming, it said, Danny here 3 days early. So maybe the thing in that forest wasn't trying to find Daniel, maybe it was waiting for him. So I am curious, which would make you turn around? Footprints outside your window, a dead person calling from the trees, or your best friend asking for help? Tell me in the comments. And if stories like this are your thing, subscribe to the channel. There are a lot more creatures, legends, and strange stories out there, and trust me, the Wendigo is only one of them. So subscribe. Stick around and let me know which creature we should go after next, and until then, do me one favor. If you ever hear your name coming from a dark forest, don't answer. Don't even turn around, just keep walking. Especially if the person calling your name is standing right next to you.